People live in a very unusual world, which appeared as a result of the merger of the ordinary world and the world of a computer game. In this world, there lived a guy named Yunshin, who studied in one of the schools where students learned to master their class skills. One day, Yunshin entered his classroom, and after a few seconds he heard some sounds. As it turned out later, one of Yunshin's classmates was happy that he had chosen the summoner class and received 3 contract summons for it, and he invited the others to join his team. However, one of the classmates told this guy that she, as a proud priest, could not join his team, and she said that this guy should join her team. Because of this, a small quarrel began between this guy and the girl, which Yunshin watched, and after a couple of minutes they decided to sort things out on the site. Yunshin looked at this quarrel and thought that during the 3 years that he had been in this world, he had already begun to understand all the strangeness of this so unusual world. It has been 70 years since the real world merged with the game, and the lives of ordinary people have gone through a huge number of different changes in this new world. Since then, people have had levels, classes, equipment, and other attributes of a classic computer game, and these attributes have become very highly valued among people. As a person's level increased, various indicators and characteristics also increased, and various classes and skills endowed people with new abilities and useful effects. However, despite all this, various monsters also burst into the real world and disturbed human peace. Various creatures have begun to cause destruction and chaos, and people are trying to actively resist creatures from another world. Since childhood, Yunshin also dreamed of fighting monsters from other worlds. Suddenly, an elderly man who was Yunshin's teacher suddenly entered the classroom. Upon entering the classroom, the teacher first told the students that it was time for them to return home, as their families would be very worried about them. When all the students except Yunshin left the class and headed home, the teacher approached Yunshin and asked him if he had changed his class for tomorrow's exam. The teacher told Yunshin that if he did not change his class, this would greatly affect his further development and skills in the future, but Yunshin was not very frightened by this news. The teacher also told Yunshin that the longer he delays choosing a main class, the more difficulties he will encounter on his way, while it is easier for people with a class to improve their skills. The teacher also told Yunshin that if he finally wants to change his class, the easier it will be for him to raise his level and gain new skills and abilities. However, Yunshin told his teacher that even if he did not choose one specific class, he could still become one of the strongest people. Also, Yunshin was not at all worried about gaining skill points and attributes, since he had a system. The essence of Yunshin's system was that he pumped up his level by performing simple tasks such as running, push-ups, and other physical exercises. While all other people level up through complex quests, Yunshin simply needs to complete a series of simple exercises for the same reward. Despite the fact that it was difficult for people without a class to earn skill points, while such people had a lot of skills themselves, they were all basic and not very strong. Even though Yunshin did not choose a specific skill, he could still level up the skills of any class for himself, making himself an almost universal player. Yunshin was especially pleased that the system not only gives him easy skill points, but also hides his level and other parameters of his leveling from other people. After another training, Yunshin again received additional skill points, and he decided to distribute 2 skill points to each of his attributes. In addition to standard daily tasks, Yunshin also performed various secondary activities, which gave him various rewards, including skill points. To successfully complete the next task, Yunshin had to win tomorrow's exam, and Yunshin was as determined and confident as possible in his victory. The next day, a lot of people gathered at one of the sites to take the exam. After some time, Yunshin's teacher came to the site and wanted to tell his students about the rules of the exam. There were 3 doors on the site with different difficulty levels, and as soon as the doors open, the students must go through them, after which they will find themselves in the dungeon, where the exam will take place. Students could also form groups to complete the dungeon more easily, and the higher the level of the dungeon, the higher the score, but if the students failed, they would die. After some time, all the gates to the dungeons opened, and the teacher told all the students to go through any gates they wanted. A second later, all the students were in front of the gate, and after a few seconds, all the students were able to choose the dungeon they were going to go through. Many viewers noticed that most of the students decided to form small groups to increase their chances of winning. Suddenly, the audience noticed that only one of the students not only decided to act on their own, but also decided to choose the most difficult dungeon they had. This same student who went alone into the most difficult dungeon was Yunchen, and many thought that Yunchen was simply crazy. The spectators also noticed that Yunchen had very unusual equipment, and several types of weapons, and they believed that Yunchen was the only student who did not choose a class. The spectators were greatly surprised by the fact that despite the fact that Yunchen did not change his class, he still went into the most difficult dungeon with a set of useless weapons and skills. When Yunchen's teacher found out that Yunchen had not changed his class, he only thought that this could end badly for him. The teacher was especially frightened by the fact that Yunchen went to the most difficult dungeon, and he believed that Yunchen went to certain death. Then the school principal approached Yunchen's teacher, and he demanded an explanation from the teacher as to why Yunchen did not change his class and went into the most difficult dungeon alone. Then the teacher decided to lie to the director, and he told him that Yunchen is a very talented and capable student, for whom such a dungeon does not pose any serious threat. Meanwhile, Yunchen was looking around the dungeon he had just found himself in. After this, Yunchen made sure that even the atmosphere of this dungeon corresponded to its high difficulty. After this, Yunchen finally prepared to enter the dungeon in hopes of passing it. Meanwhile, they were discussing how much equipment Yunchen had, which included a gun, a shield, a pistol, and even combat gloves. Then one of the spectators thought that now Yunchen was simply trembling with fear and was already beginning to regret that he had gone to this dungeon. However, another viewer thought that Yunchen was not afraid at all, since he saw Yunchen not only going deep into the dungeon, but even running there as quickly as possible. After Yunchen used one of his skills to increase his movement speed, he ran through the dungeon even faster. After a couple of minutes of such fast running, Yunchen came across his first enemies, who turned out to be a crowd of goblins. The crowd of goblins noticed how quickly Yunchen was running towards them, and they immediately decided to attack him. Then Yunchen stopped, took out a combination weapon and used the main combat skill of magicians towards the goblins. After that, a large and powerful fireball flew towards the goblins, which neutralized most of all the goblins the first time. After Yunchen's attack, the bodies of defeated goblins lay in the place where the goblins lived. The spectators were shocked at how Yunchen was able to so easily neutralize an entire crowd of goblins with one of the weakest magic spells. At one point, one of the spectators noticed how the weapon in Yunchen's hands began to change its shape. Meanwhile, Yunchen's staff transformed from a magical staff into a one-handed sword, which had a passive skill that increased the strength parameter of its owner. After that, Yunchen used one of his skills that increased the height of his jump. The moment Yunchen jumped high into the air, he immediately finished off one of the goblins with his sword. When Yunchen landed on the ground, he immediately cut another goblin into pieces. The remaining goblins were frightened by how easily Yunchen cut down their companions. Hoping to somehow defeat Yunchen, the goblins tried to surround Yunchen in order to intimidate and overpower him. Yunchen then decided to use one of his sword's abilities to finish off the remaining goblins as quickly as possible. The spectators were shocked at how strong the primary skills that Yunchen used were. At this moment, they began to rejoice at how easily Yunchen showed his fighting skills. Viewers were also surprised by how Yunchen managed to move so quickly despite all his equipment, which could cause the slowing effect of overload. One of the spectators suggested that Yunchen had improved his physical strength well, but in that case, his fireball strike would not have been so powerful. Meanwhile, the school principal was trying to understand why Yunchen's skills were so strong. Then Yunchen's teacher told the director that Yunchen's special talent was omnipotence, which made it possible to remove some restrictions on his pumping by 2 times. The principal told Yunchen's teacher that some people manage to awaken their natural abilities between the ages of 12 and 25, and based on their ability, they choose the class that suits them. Usually, if a person has good magical abilities, then this person chooses one of the magical classes. If someone has better developed physical abilities, then such a person will prefer to choose some kind of combat class. However, in addition to combat skills, people may also exhibit specific abilities, in which case people will want to become, for example, cooks or cleaners. The director also believed that usually people with a talent for omnipotence can only be strong in the initial stages, but gradually as they level up they become weaker. The people who were with the director also believed that despite such great strength, Yunchen's leveling threshold was too low, and therefore they should not focus their attention on him. Yunchen's teacher then explained to the principal that this was why he advised Yunchen to change his class, because the stronger he became now, the weaker he would become in the future. At this moment, Yunshin had already managed to kill all the goblins that crossed his path. Soon, Yunshin continued his journey deeper into the dungeon, and he saw a large stone gate in front of him. Yunshin believed that this stone gate led to the next room, and he tried to open this gate. As soon as Yunshin opened the stone gate, he saw a crowd of several hundred goblins in front of him. Yunshin saw a huge number of goblins in front of him that he needed to defeat. Also, all goblins had different varieties and characteristics, such as level, difficulty, skills, and role in the team. To assess his situation, Yunshin decided to use the assessment skill to determine the basic characteristics of his opponents, and Yunshin realized that his opponents had quite decent equipment and skills. Also, Yunshin at one point realized that in this case, analyzing enemies would not give him any advantages, since there were too many goblins, and the terrain did not allow Yunshin to use some of his skills. Suddenly, one of the goblins shouted something in his own language and pointed at Yunshin, after which the rest of the goblins began to attack Yunshin. Also, some goblins began to use magic to strengthen their allies and attack Yunshin with magical techniques. Yunshin realized that he would not be able to deal with this crowd as well as the previous goblins, and he decided to use another weapon. After that, Yunshin took out a magic staff, after using which the entire cave was swallowed up by a bright light. The light from Yunshin's staff was so strong that almost all the goblins lost the ability to see everything that was happening for a while. After a few seconds, the light from the staff still disappeared, but the goblins still could not see normally. Yunshin decides to take advantage of such an awkward position of the goblins, and the first thing he decided to do was get rid of the fighting goblins. Using his advanced stealth assassin skills, Yunshin was able to quickly and silently get rid of one of the battle goblins. Soon the goblin's vision returned, and one of the goblins pointed at Yunshin and ordered everyone to attack him. After this, a huge crowd of goblins tried to attack Yunshin again to finally defeat him. As soon as several goblins got close enough to Yunshin, Yunshin used a special skill that creates a clone of himself that has all his skills and can fight for Yunshin. After using this technique, Yunshin and his clone began to destroy all the goblins closest to them with lightning speed, using a variety of combat skills to do this. Soon, most of the goblins had already been killed, and their combat power began to decline at great speed. However, at one point, one of the goblins began to accumulate rage within himself, which is why he became larger and more dangerous, which also increased his characteristics. Yunshin looked at this goblin and believed that this goblin was one of the bosses since he could accumulate rage on his own. After this, the huge goblin immediately attacked Yunshin, hoping to inflict at least some damage on him. At this moment, Yunshin used his skill, increasing the height of his jump, after which he took out his staff. While Yunshin was in the air, he used his magic staff to summon water elementals that would distract the attention of other enemies. At one point, Yunshin's fight with the huge goblin disappeared, and another student appeared on the viewer's screen, who was also fighting the goblin. The audience was unhappy with this act, and they began to demand that Yunshin's fight be returned to the screen. Soon the crowd became so angry that spectators began throwing various garbage. Meanwhile, in the broadcast room, one of the people who was in charge of the broadcast on the spectator monitor told his boss that they had been looking at Yunshin for 3 minutes already, and he decided to diversify the broadcast a little. However, the head of the broadcast room told his employee that he should start showing Yunshin again, since his fight was interesting not only to the audience, but also to himself. When Yunshin began to be shown on the big screen again, viewers began to discuss with each other how well Yunshin had both magical skills and stealth assassin skills. Yunshin was so proficient in the skills of a stealth assassin that even the instructor who trained students in stealth assassination also began to admire Yunshin's skill. The instructor from the stealth assassin department believed that Yunshin was simply the perfect all-around warrior who could not only support himself and his team, but also deal well with enemies. Meanwhile, water elementals appeared in the goblin cave, distracting all the goblins' attention and attacking the goblins. At first, the spectators lost sight of Yunshin, but later they noticed Yunshin preparing to fight the furious goblin. At this moment, Yunshin was thinking about how he could most effectively defeat the raging goblin. At one point, the furious goblin still decided to attack Yunshin first, using a short blade as a weapon. At this moment, Yunshin threw a trap at the feet of the furious goblin, which immobilized the goblin for 2 seconds. While the goblin stood still, Yunshin prepared to use several fireballs to inflict significant damage on the goblin. After a couple of seconds, Yunshin's trap disappeared, and the goblin tried to attack Yunqin as quickly as possible. However, Yunqin managed to activate a skill that increased his movement speed, and he immediately bounced several meters away from the goblin, and the goblin noticed that he had stepped on something. At that moment, he looked at his feet and saw a small mine under them that Yunqin had left. A couple of seconds later, the mine under the goblin's feet exploded, leaving the furious goblin no chance to survive such a powerful explosion. The explosion was extremely powerful, leaving behind a huge amount of smoke. The smoke from the explosion was so large that even the goblins from the other end of the cave could see it. However, Yunqin still knew that this explosion would not be enough for him to defeat the goblin boss. As soon as the smoke from the explosion cleared, Yunqin saw the goblin boss who was about to use his most powerful skill. Yunqin noticed that the boss had decided to use his strongest move, and he could not allow it, after which Yunqin decided to use one of his skills. A second later, huge vines began to sprout from the ground at great speed, which immediately grabbed the boss. Later, Yunqin began using vines to attack the boss, causing him great damage. After this, Yunqin used another magic spell that created ice balls, which, if successfully hit, significantly reduced the enemy's speed and caused passive damage. The ice balls hit the immobilized boss one after another, and caused him colossal damage. While ice balls were flying at the boss, Yunqin gradually used other attacking skills that summoned water balls, lightning, fire, and even rocket projectiles. Soon all these projectiles began to inflict huge amounts of damage on the goblin bosses, and soon the goblin boss simply stopped showing signs of life. The spectators were amazed at how Yunqin was able to defeat the goblin boss so easily, and at one point they even felt a little sorry for the boss. Also, all the spectators were surprised at how Yunqin could control all his skills and techniques so easily and smoothly. Also, the people who were watching Yunqin along with the director were surprised at how Yunqin was able to deftly neutralize the goblin boss. People also liked the fact that Yunqin used his techniques extremely deliberately, such as using water magic and lightning at the same time, which can stun the enemy. Also, one woman noticed that Yunqin did not allow the goblin boss to use his strongest ability, which made it much easier for Yunqin to defeat the goblin boss. Then one of the people who, together with the director, watched Yunqin's fight, expressed his respect to Yunqin for such a strong fighter who did not have a certain class. Later, this man told Yunqin's teacher that his student could very well be among the top 5 strongest fighters in the province, and that he could easily break the school record. However, the school principal said that with such skills, Yunqin could very well end up in the top 3 fighters, while the school's strongest student was ranked 9th. After that, the director called teacher Yunqin over and invited him to sit down with him. Yunqin's dumbfounded teacher told the principal that he did not doubt Yunqin's potential at all and was confident that Yunqin would do better than the rest of the students. At this moment, one girl was so amazed by the skills of the classless Yunqin, who was excellent at all kinds of skills, that she told her teacher that she wanted to follow his example. However, the magic teacher told the girl that she could not become as strong as Yunqin, since she could not even use her magic staff normally. Then the magic teacher asked his student if she could become as strong and skillful as Yunqin. Also, the magic teacher told his student that they were not in a game, but in the real world, which did not forgive any mistakes. The magic teacher also told his student that they could only learn from what Yunqin could achieve, but he was still not the person they should imitate. Meanwhile, Yunqin reached the end of the cave, and the stone gate was again in front of him, which led him to the next stage of testing. Yunqin felt that he should not hesitate, and he immediately opened the stone gate and walked through it. The audience was then surprised that Yunqin, instead of taking a short rest after the battle with the goblin boss and his minions, decided to immediately move on to the next stage of the test. The school principal felt that Yunqin was extremely reckless, since at the moment, most of the students had not even passed their first test. The director believed that Yunqin had enough time to take a break and rest before the next test, and he demanded an explanation from Yunqin's teacher as to why Yunqin did this. Then Yunqin's teacher told the director that perhaps Yunqin decided not to stop in order to pass the test as quickly as possible, since the time for passing the test is also estimated. Meanwhile, the magic teacher believed that Yunqin had gone to certain death, and that they would lose such a brilliant fighter as quickly as they found him. However, the girl told her teacher that Yunqin still had many weapons, and that he probably had some special strategy. Then the magic teacher said that despite the fact that Yunqin had excellent command of all types of skills and weapons, he still believed that sooner or later Yunchen simply would not have enough strength for further battles. Also, the magic teacher believed that Yunchen was unable to handle all the other weapons, and that all the enemies in the next trial were of a much higher level than in the previous trial. The magic teacher also believed that even if Yunchen was good at all his weapons, then even with recovery skills he definitely would not have enough magical energy to fully use them. As soon as Yunchen found himself in the next cave, he noticed that of all the enemies, only high-level goblins remained, who used very powerful spells. Before starting the battle, Yunchen decided to use all the skills he had on himself, which enhanced his characteristics. Yunchen also remembered his water elementals, which would soon disappear, and in this battle he decided to make the most of them. Meanwhile, an entire army of goblins prepared their spells to get rid of Yunchen. A few seconds later, a huge number of different magic spheres flew towards Yunchen, with which the goblins wanted to finish off Yunchen. Before the magic missiles reached Yunchen, he ordered his water elementals to stand in front of him and block all the goblins' magical attacks. After that, Yunchen's water elementals stood in front of Yunchen and began to take all the magical damage upon themselves, leaving behind a huge amount of water vapor. At one point, there was so much water vapor that the goblins immediately lost Yunchen from their field of vision. As soon as the water vapor cleared, the goblins saw Yunchen standing in front of their army with 2 pistols in his hands, who was already ready to attack the goblin army. The director said that even though the marksman class had a lot of different skills, this class was still one of the hardest classes among the others. Also, Yunchen's teacher said that the marksman class had one special passive effect, due to which a person should not miss, otherwise the person would not be able to achieve much damage. The magic teacher believed that with Yunchen's vast amount of skill, it would be easy for him to defeat the goblins. Yunchen fired his first shot, and the girl immediately jumped up from her seat and began shouting words of encouragement to Yunchen. With the first shot, Yunchen was able to hit one of the goblins directly in the head, after which Yunchen acquired a special passive effect of the shooter. This passive effect increased Yunchen's movement and shooting speed with firearms by 2%, and this effect could stack up to 25 times. After that, Yunchen began to shoot the crowd of goblins with his pistols, and with each goblin killed, Yunchen killed the remaining goblins even faster. At this moment, the remaining goblins decided to use their magical skills as soon as possible in order to quickly neutralize Yunchen. However, thanks to another active skill, Yunchen was able to perform a slippery lunge, thanks to which Yunchen was able to dodge the goblins' magical attacks. After a slippery attack, Yunchen managed to kill several more goblins, and thus he was able to increase his shooting speed and movement speed again. After a few kills, the goblins began trying to use their magical skills to summon even more magic balls. Then Yunchen jumped as high as possible, due to which the goblins' magical projectiles not only did not cause any damage to Yunchen, but also hit other goblins. During the jump, Yunchen used a few more marksmanship skills, such as accelerated reloading and explosive rounds, after which he began to shoot the rest of the goblins on the fly. Thanks to his passive skill, Yunchen was able to shoot most of the goblins right in the air, and at the same time, Yunchen still never missed. When Yunchen landed on the ground, he was already standing in front of countless goblin corpses, each of which was sure to have their heads shot out. The spectators were shocked that Yunchen not only mastered the firearms, but was also able to never miss the goblins, while only hitting the heads. All the spectators were delighted with Yunchen's skill, and many girls in the stands wanted to start dating Yunchen. Meanwhile, the magic teacher continued to look at the screen and think that Yunchen was indeed very proficient in the skills and abilities of all classes. Meanwhile, the school principal watched Yunchen's fight and thought that Yunchen was not only extremely calculating, but also very resourceful. Also, the man who, together with the director, watched Yunchen's fight, noticed that during the entire time in the dungeon, Yunchen never used a single potion, but according to the rules this was allowed. Then the others thought that Yunchen was so strong that he did not need any potions. However, Yunchen's teacher said that Yunchen simply did not take any potions, and he filled his inventory with various weapons, explosives, and a lot of ammo. At this moment, the director felt that Yunchen was either very confident in his abilities or extremely reckless. Meanwhile, Yunchen was about to fire a few more shots, but instead of firing, smoke began to come out of Yunchen's pistols. At this moment, the audience did not understand what exactly Yunchen was going to do, and they believed that he would now do something very cool and epic. Yunshin then realized that due to his firing speed being too high, his pistols had suddenly broken, and now they could no longer be used normally. Due to the sudden breakdown, Yunshin had to throw away his pistols, as they were made of the simplest materials and they could not withstand such a high rate of fire. Then the school principal suddenly began to worry that Yunshin's pistols were suddenly out of order, and he asked his teacher what materials these pistols were made of. The principal was shocked when Yunshin's teacher told him that his pistols were made from the cheapest materials. Then the director grabbed teacher Yunshin and started asking him why he allowed him to go to the test with such a bad weapon, and the teacher said that Yunshin could not afford a good weapon. Also, Yunshin's teacher told the director that Yunshin's parents died, and in addition to this, he must take care of his younger sister. Then the director, with tears in his eyes, told Yunshin's teacher that if he had told him about this earlier, he would have bought Yunshin any weapon himself, but now it was too late to decide anything. After a few minutes, Yunshin was still able to defeat the remaining goblins, and he immediately headed to the last room with the final boss of the entire dungeon. Then the director and his people thought that if Yunshin dealt with the boss as quickly as he dealt with the goblins, then Yunshin would become the deserved champion of the entire province. The headmaster had already begun to imagine how his school would become famous when Yunshin broke the record and became the best in the entire province, and then he would be the headmaster who could make history. However, the director later turned to Yunshin's teacher and told him that if Yunshin still did not defeat the final boss, then he would have to fire Yunshin's teacher. Yunshin's teacher then began to hope that Yunshin would be strong enough to become the best in the province. All the spectators began to look forward to the moment when Yunshin finally entered the battle with the final boss of the Nightmare Dungeon. People only thought that history was being made right now before their eyes, how a classless man would become the most powerful warrior. However, as soon as Yunshin entered the room with the final boss, the audience began to be very indignant, as they were not interested in watching other students fight. When the interference on the big screen disappeared, the audience saw a terrible picture in front of them, where on the big screen they saw the bodies of dead students who could not pass the tests further. Soon the screen began to show other bodies of students who died in the dungeons. People looked at the corpses of the disciples and they were scared because while they were looking at Yunshin, these disciples were dying in battle, and these people were very scared and very ashamed to look at this. At this moment, the audience noticed a light from the return scrolls, which returned students from the dungeons to the real world. When the movement of the participants was completed, exhausted and seriously wounded students appeared in front of the audience. Many of the returning students couldn't accept the fact that they failed to pass the dungeon trials, and many of the students couldn't even stand on their feet due to lack of strength. With each passing second, it became more and more scary for the audience to watch the fact that these students were unable to pass the dungeons beyond the goblin boss. The girl who was learning from the magic teacher began to panic because she was afraid that when it was her turn to go through the dungeons, she would not even be able to survive in this dungeon. The director saw the panic and fear in the audience's faces, and he asked to turn on Yunshin's broadcast so as not to undermine the morale of the rest of the students. Yunshin's teacher looked at the director and thought that last time, almost all of the students who acted as core warriors passed the exam successfully. Then Yunshin's teacher believed that now the school director sees Yunshin as the best student who must definitely pass this exam. Soon, Yunshin's trial began to be shown on the big screen again, and everyone began to wait for Yunshin's final fight again. As soon as Yunshin passed through the gate, he found himself in a huge room, at the end of which a huge creature was sitting on a crystal throne, which was the final boss. When Yunshin reached the final boss, a huge creature sitting on a crystal throne told Yunshin that a mere mortal like him did not belong here. After scanning the final boss, Yunshin learned that it was the monarch of the mountains, who was also the ruler of all the goblins that were in this dungeon. Yunshin thought that the strength of this final boss was truly amazing, and Yunshin was also surprised that this mountain monarch could understand human speech. Yunshin then took out his still unused weapon and told the mountain monarch that he would defeat him in the next 20 seconds. After that, Yunshin took out his spear and prepared to use the monk's special skill, which increased all stats by 80% for 20 seconds. Yunshin's teacher believed that Yunshin was acting extremely unreasonably, since Yunshin had plenty of time to defeat the boss, and he did not need to rush at all. The school principal began to worry so much about Yunshin that his blood pressure rose sharply, and then he needed special pills that should lower his blood pressure. Meanwhile, Yunshin had already used his monk skill, and after that, he immediately began to attack the mountain monarch with his spear. The mountain monarch was somewhat surprised that Yun Chen's speed was as fast as Yun Chen's, but the mountain monarch said that it would still not be enough to defeat him. After this, the mountain monarch took out his huge axe and swung it towards Yunqin in order to get rid of him as quickly as possible. Yunqin did not have enough reaction to dodge the attack of the final boss, and the monarch of the mountains easily cut Yunqin into 2 pieces. The spectators were afraid that the monarch of the mountains had still managed to defeat Yunqin, and they thought that even with Yunqin's skills, it would not be easy to deal with the final boss of the Nightmare Dungeon. However, the director noticed that Yunqin's severed body simply evaporated, and he believed that it was not the real Yunqin. As it turned out, Yunqin used the skill of a stealthy assassin to create a clone of himself, which distracted the attention of the monarch of the mountains, while Yunqin himself was behind the final boss. When the clone disappeared, Yunqin immediately attacked the mountain monarch, stabbing him with the tip of his spear and running it down the entire back of the mountain monarch. When the mountain monarch turned back to try to attack Yunqin again, he noticed that Yunqin was no longer behind him. When the monarch of the mountains turned around, he saw Yunqin in front of him, in whose hands was a staff, from which a very bright glow emanated. The monarch of the mountains could not withstand such a bright light, which caused him to be blinded for a while. After that, Yunqin again took out his spear, with which he wanted to kill the monarch of the mountains before the final boss could see again. However, the monarch of the mountains was so angry that he almost immediately entered a state of rage. After the mountain monarch entered the rage stage, all of his stats were increased, and due to his increased defense, Yunqin was unable to break through his defense. Due to Yunqin's strong blow and the increased defense of the final boss, Yunqin's spear was unable to withstand such a blow, causing the spear to immediately break. At this moment, the mountain monarch tried to attack Yunqin again, hoping that in the rage stage he would still be able to neutralize Yunqin. After that, the mountain monarch made a crushing blow, after which Yunqin would definitely not be able to survive. However, Yunqin not only managed to dodge the attack of the monarch of the mountains, but also used the druid's vines, with which he wanted to immobilize the enemy. There were only 13 seconds left before the monk's skill that Yunqin used at the beginning of the battle would expire, and Yunqin needed to hurry up and defeat the monarch of the mountains as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the spectators noticed that Yunqin had never attacked with a spear yet, but it still broke with 1 blow, and they believed that even with the improvements, Yunqin would not be able to defeat the monarch of the mountains. However, the magic teacher believed that since Yunqin was able to blind the monarch of the mountains, then Yunqin's combat performance indicators were extremely high. Then the director believed that the black iron spear could not withstand such high characteristics of Yunqin and the monarch of the mountains, which is why the spear broke from the first blow. The director also told Yunqin's teacher that among all of Yunqin's weapons, there should never be low-quality black iron weapons. However, the teacher believed that if Yunqin could not defeat the mountain monarch just because of poor equipment, then he would become the worst teacher in the entire history of the province. Yunqin looked at the monarch of the mountains, and he planned to end the battle as quickly as possible, but now he thought that the battle would be much more difficult and protracted. After this, Yunqin used a special scout skill that allowed him to see the weak points of his opponents. However, when Yunqin used his skill on the mountain monarch, he only saw the dark silhouette of the final boss, which indicated that Yunqin could not see the weakness of the mountain monarch. While Yunqin was trying to find his opponent's weak spots, the mountain monarch was trying to get rid of Yunqin as quickly as possible. The mountain monarch launched several quick attacks, but Yunqin was able to dodge each attack. As a result, Yunqin decided to jump as far away from the mountain monarch as possible, making it much more difficult for him to attack him with his weapon. However, as soon as Yunqin moved away from the final boss, the monarch of the mountains kicked the ground with all his might, which triggered a very powerful earthquake. The force of the earthquake was so great that it was extremely difficult for Yunqin to stand on his feet. After this, the mountain monarch immediately attacked Yunqin, and then Yunqin decided to use his weapon and blocking skill to prevent the mountain monarch from harming him. However, the blow from the monarch of the mountains was so strong that Yunqin could not hold on to his weapon, causing him to fly into one of the walls of the cave at high speed, and Yunqin's weapon instantly broke. There were still 9 seconds left before the end of Yunqin's enhancing skill, and during this time Yunqin needed to defeat the final boss of the dungeon. The spectators watched the fight between Yunqin and the monarch of the mountains, and everyone was very worried that Yunchen might not have time to defeat the final boss before his enhancing skill disappeared. The director was very worried that Yunchen's lack of a sword, which turns into a staff, prevents him from using magic techniques. Also, Yunchen's teacher believed that if Yunchen did not have any healing potions, then any blow from the final boss could be Yunchen's last. At this moment, the monarch approached Yunchen to finally get rid of him. Yunchen's enhancing skill could last for another 7 seconds, and during this time, Yunchen decided to use the druid skill, which summons plants that will hold the monarch of the mountains. At this moment, the audience felt that Yunchen had made a mistake by using the druid skill, since the skills of this class were not suitable for inflicting much damage on opponents. However, the spectators also noticed that the monarch of the mountains did not dodge the spear, and at the same time, he still tried to defend himself from the plants summoned by Yunchen. The director carefully watched Yunchen's fight against the mountain monarch, and he believed that Yunchen still managed to find the weak spot of the final boss. Meanwhile, Yunchen prepared the battle gloves with which he was going to finally defeat the mountain monarch, and he told him that during the fight he felt his weaknesses. Yunchen then again used the skill of finding the enemy's weak points to better find the vulnerability of the mountain monarch, since he believed that there could be no invulnerable creatures in the exam. Then the monarch of the mountains, with a frightened voice, tries to convince Yunchen that he will not be able to defeat him. At this moment, Yunchen's summoning plants began to tear the mountain monarch's cloak into small pieces, and he told the final boss that his weakness was hidden under his cloak on his back. Yunchen only had 3 seconds left of the enhancement skill, and he decided to use them to deal a crushing blow to the mountain monarch at his weak point using his combat gloves. However, the mountain monarch began to try to get out of the captivity of Yunchen's plants, but the mountain monarch could not move at all. The spectators looked at the fearful expression on the mountain monarch's face, and they believed that Yunchen would finally be able to defeat the final boss. However, soon the holding plants began to weaken, and then the monarch of the mountains was able to turn his face to Yunchen so that he could not hit his weak point. Then Yunchen hit the mountain monarch with his technique, who was able to withstand the damage without dying. Yunchen's attack only knocked the mountain monarch down, and as he fell, the mountain monarch told Yunchen that he had now definitely lost. However, the monarch of the mountains began to fall with his back to the exact place where the tip of the spear that had come off was sticking out of the ground. When the mountain monarch fell back to the ground, the tip of the spear precisely hit his weak point, causing the mountain monarch to be finally defeated. When the monarch of the mountains finally died in front of Yunchen, a congratulatory message appeared about successfully completing the dungeon with maximum difficulty in 14 minutes 47 seconds. At this moment, all the spectators began to rejoice that Yunchen finally managed to pass all the tests of the Nightmare Dungeon. After defeating the final boss of the dungeon, his body began to slowly dissolve, leaving behind several things. At the place where the body of the mountain monarch lay, several pieces of green forest equipment appeared. In addition to new sets of equipment, Yunchen also received a large number of other rewards, including a lot of experience, skill points and a special title that increases all damage to goblins. Yunchen was very happy that his level had greatly increased by several points at once, and that he became the first person who was able to clear this dungeon to the SSS rank. After that, several talents appeared in front of Yunchen for Yunchen to become the first person who could clear this dungeon so quickly to such a high score. The first talent gave Yunchen the opportunity to use all types of magic spells more often. The second skill increased Yunchen's every attack by 30%, and the damage of every third attack almost doubled. The third skill increased Yunchen's damage and attack speed by 2 times when Yunchen received heavy wounds. Yunchen thought that all of these attacks were very strong and useful. However, Yunchen decided that with his battle tactics, he should choose the first talent. After obtaining a new talent, Yunchen decided to evaluate the new equipment that he obtained from the corpse of the mountain monarch. After wearing the new equipment, Yunchen's strength and physique increased greatly, and the passive ability of the equipment restored Yunchen's health and magical energy outside of battle. Yunchen calculated that if he had this equipment during the fight with the mountain monk, then he could defeat him in just 5 seconds. After Yunchen considered all his rewards for completing the Nightmare Dungeon, he decided that it was time for him to leave this dungeon and return to the real world. Once in the arena, Yunchen did not understand why everyone was rejoicing at his return and shouting his name. Back then, the viewers were very happy about Yunchen's return, and many viewers now even began to call Yunshin a god. Yunshin still didn't understand why everyone was so happy about his return, and why everyone started calling him a god. Soon, the director, teacher, and reporters came down to Yunshin, who wanted to wholeheartedly congratulate Yunshin on his victory. After that, the principal and teacher decided to take a photo with Yunshin for the press, so that Yunshin would be written about in the newspaper, and so that he would be shown on TV on the news. After this, the school principal told Yunshin that he would receive his exam results soon, but for now the principal wanted Yunshin to go home and have a good rest. Before Yunshin headed home, the director brought him his car, in which his personal driver would take Yunshin to his home. All the other students were shocked that the director himself allowed Yunshin to drive his car home, since the director had never treated any students so generously before. The director told Yunshin that he was confident that with this result, Yunshin could easily be in the top 3, after which the director told his driver to take Yunshin to his house. When the director's car drove away, the director thought that after this incident the Ministry of Education would definitely pay attention to his school, which would help him make history. As soon as the director's car was out of sight, one of his deputies approached the director with a phone in his hand and said that the director had already received a call from the Ministry of Education. Towards evening, Yunshin finally reached his home, where his beloved younger sister was already waiting for him. As soon as Yunshin entered the house, he saw how his younger sister Yuntang had already prepared dinner for them. The father of Yuntang and Yunshin died 10 years ago, when the province was attacked by representatives of the royal court of the orcs. Yuntang and Yunshin's mother died because she worked too hard to somehow feed her children and give them everything they needed. When their parents died, Yunshin and his sister lived off government benefits, and the only thing their parents left behind was an old black iron sword that used to belong to their father. From then on, Yuntang took over all household responsibilities, from cleaning to cooking, so that Yunshin had more time to train and study at school. Yunshin then began to work even harder on himself in order to repay his sister in the future for trying so hard for both of them. A couple of minutes later, Yuntang sat down at the table and began to eat dinner, while at the same time asking Yunshin how his school exam went today. Yunshin told his sister that despite some difficulties, he did well in the exam, and the director told him that he could be in the top 3 and that he would definitely receive an additional reward. Yuntang was very surprised and very happy for her older brother, as she believed that now they would be able to eat meat every week. Yunshin chuckled, wiped his sister's face and told her that they would eat much more in the future, and that they would eat meat every day in the future. Yunshin also promised his sister that in the future he would definitely provide her with a better life, which made Yuntang herself very happy. The next day, Yunshin went outside to train a little and continue to improve his stats. Yunshin opened his skill menu and noticed that after yesterday's exam, he began to receive a lot more experience points and skill points for his daily tasks. Yunshin also remembered that if he was among the top 7 students, he would be able to obtain a hidden class skill. After a few minutes of training, Yunshin returned home, where his sister was waiting for him with good news. Yuntang immediately hugged Yunshin and told him that he was now the best in the entire province, but Yunshin did not understand why he never received a single message with this news. Then Yuntang gave Yunshin a phone and told him that when he went to train, he forgot his phone at home, and that all morning someone had been trying to call Yunshin. Yuntang handed Yunshin his phone, and Yunshin saw a large number of messages that his director had been trying to reach him all morning. Suddenly, at one moment, the director tried to call Yunshin again, and Yunshin answered the call. The director quickly and loudly told Yunshin that after lunch he must urgently come to school, since at that time a commission would arrive, before which Yunshin would have to choose the university in which he would study. Yunshin could not believe that he would have to choose a university in which he would continue to study, since he himself did not even know which university he wanted to study at. Yunshin remembered a moment in his life when he had just entered the school, and on the first day, all students had to know their talents. In order for the students to find out what talents they had to touch a huge crystal, which would tell them what talent the students had. Yunshin was very upset when the magic crystal said that Yunshin's talent was omnipotence. That day, many of Yunshin's future classmates laughed at the fact that Yunshin had such a talent that limited the maximum values of his leveling. Yunshin's teacher tried to cheer up Yunshin, and that day he told Yunshin that he should not pay attention to his talent, and that even with such talent, Yunshin could still choose a good class. That day, Yunshin fell into a deep depression, and he believed that even if he trained hard, he was unlikely to achieve anything in the future. Suddenly, a message appeared in front of Yunchin, indicating that a system had been activated that could help Yunchin choose the right class for him. At first, Yunchin thought that all this did not matter, and that the system would definitely not help him become strong. When the class selection window appeared in front of Yunchin, he decided that it would be better for him to remain without any class. Then the system felt that Yunchin really wanted to remain classless, and then Yunchin became classless. 3 years have passed since then, and thanks to his somewhat rash choice and lack of class, Yunchin has become the strongest person in the entire province. At one point, Yunchin received a message that he had completed a special task in which he was to take a leading position in the province. Also, for completing this task, Yunchin has a huge number of different rewards, such as a very large number of experience points, skill points, new useful skills, and many other rewards. However, the most unusual reward for Yunchin was the increase in his talent of omnipotence, and now Yunchin can again raise all of his skills and abilities to the B+ rank. Yunchin was incredibly happy that he could now increase the maximum level of his skills and abilities. Since Yunchin's Z rank skills had previously been the same in strength as other people's C rank skills, now his skills were comparable in strength to B+ rank skills. Yunchin also received a rebirth cross, which is consumed if Yunchin is unable to withstand the enemy's attacks, in which case he will be reborn in a safe zone. Yunchin compared the effect of the rebirth cross to an extra life, and he believed that this cross was very valuable, and therefore he should only use it as a last resort. Yunchin was also glad that he now had an improved self-healing skill and a divine lightning skill, which allowed the owner to move through space and shoot lightning. At that moment, his sister ran up to Yunchin with a phone to inform his elder brother that everyone on the internet was showing news only about him, and also everyone was talking about his award. Yuntang handed Yunchen's phone number, and he said that there is no point in talking about this now, since all the news publishers just want to use his achievement as advertising. Yuntang then told Yunchin that this was a great opportunity to earn a lot of money, but Yunchin said that he would only accept the gift from the Ministry of Education since they would not ask for anything in return. Soon, Yunchin told his sister that the commission had probably already started, and therefore he needed to rush to school. When Yunchin got to school, he saw a bunch of reporters next to it, who were interviewing his classmates, asking them a variety of, and sometimes even stupid, questions. Yunchin decided to sneak into the school under disguise so that the reporters would not surround him and block his way to school. Meanwhile, the school director, along with Yunchen's teacher and representatives of the best academies in the province, gathered in one office to decide which of the academies Yunchin would continue to study at. Hua, the Qing Academy's admissions supervisor, was concerned that Yunchen's achievement had caused the students to become extremely reckless, and he was not happy with this situation. Hua then stated that if Yunchin did not choose one of the possible classes, then he would not allow him to study at his academy. The school principal told Hua that Yunchin attracted the attention of the public because he became the strongest without choosing a class, and the director did not want Yunchin to lose his peculiarity. Then Hua told the school principal that people without a class cannot have any potential, and that if Yunchin still chooses a class, he will be gladly accepted into the Qing Academy. Then Tian Yuanzhou, one of the students at Qing Academy, told Hua that he should not waste his time on some boy from the wilderness. Tian also told Hua that Yunchin was just a simple guy who deprived himself of a bright future for fleeting fame, and she believed that because of this, Yunchin was extremely short-sighted. Hua then said that Yunchin must have taken advantage of some loophole to get the maximum grade. Yunchin's teacher then broke down and told Hua that he didn't understand how hard it was for Yunchin to be classless, and even so, he was able to become so strong even without any loopholes or tricks. Then Hua thought that Yunchin's teacher was just talking nonsense, and he suggested that he calm down a little. Another teacher, whose academy this school belonged to, told Hua that she would not allow him to in any way affect the honor and dignity of this school and its students. However, this warning did nothing to change Hua's behavior, and he said that there were many more talented students in his academy. Soon a loud quarrel began in the office, in which other teachers from other academies were already involved. The school principal was not going to tolerate all this madness, and he told everyone gathered to stop arguing, after which he reminded that they had gathered here to discuss the future of Yunchin. Tian then told the school principal that they had too many suspicions about the past exams, the results of which were far from reality. Soon, Yunshin entered the office and told Tian that he was saying extremely unpleasant things that could provoke a conflict. Yunshin's teacher and the school principal were very happy that Yunshin finally came to the commission, and then they decided to first introduce Yunshin to everyone who had gathered in this office. However, Yunshin interrupted the principal and his teacher, telling them that he had already heard through the door the names of everyone who had gathered in the office. After this, Yunshin approached Tian and asked him if he would like to personally test how strong he really is. Then Yunshin invited Tian to fight against each other, and told him that if he could not defeat him in 5 breaths, then he lost. Tian was somewhat amazed by the courage of Yunshin, who had just graduated from school yesterday, and today he was already challenging one of the students of the Qing Academy. Yunshin's teacher warned him that he should calm down as Tian Yuanzhou had been studying at Qing Academy for over a year, and that he was much stronger than him. Tian then turned to Yunshin's teacher and told him that he was simply afraid that his student would not be able to defeat him in a duel, and he reminded him that Yunshin himself had challenged him. The director believed that Yunshin was too frisky, since he was only level 13, while Tian was already level 19, which was a very significant big difference. After a couple of minutes, everyone who was in the office moved to the gym, where Yunshin would fight against Tian. Hua told Tian that despite that to win he just needs to hold out for 5 breaths, he still asked him to teach the arrogant and self-confident Yunshin a lesson. Tian turned back and told Hua that he had nothing to worry about and that he would be able to defeat Yunshin with just 3 spells. Yunshin's teacher said that he was very worried about Yunshin, and the director told him that it was too late to decide anything, and they could only hope for a miracle. Tian took out his magic staff, and he believed that since Yunshin took out his sword, which can turn into a staff, then he would surely combine spells with melee attacks. However, Yunshin said that due to some damage, this staff could not transform into a sword, and therefore he would only have to use magic attacks. However, Yunshin did not despair at all, as he believed that it would be enough for him to use magic to defeat Tian. Yunshin's words offended Tian somewhat, and out of anger, Tian immediately began to use his magic techniques. While Tian was preparing to use his magic techniques, he told Yunshin that he could cast his spells in less than a second, and he believed that Yunshin simply would not have time to do anything. However, Tian was shocked that Yunshin had already used his magic much faster than him. In this case, Tian had to cancel his previous magic move, and to protect himself from the attack, he summoned a magical shield. However, after a couple of seconds, cracks began to appear in Tian's magic shield, and with each passing second the number of cracks only grew. Tian did not understand why Yunshin's fireballs were so powerful that they were capable of destroying his shield. Soon, Tian's shield completely collapsed, and all of Yunshin's fireballs flew towards Tian. Tian was unable to do anything, and in less than a second, a powerful explosion formed at the place where Tian was standing. Yunshin just stood there and watched the smoke that formed after the explosion of his fireballs dissipate. As soon as the smoke cleared, everyone saw Tian unconscious and covered in burns lying on the floor. Yunshin approached the body of the defeated Tian, stepped on it, and showed everyone how weak the students of the Qing Academy were. Yunshin's teacher was surprised at how easily Yunshin used the fireball frontal attack, causing the entire fight to last only 2 seconds. Some teachers from other academies noticed that Yunshin's fireballs were purple in color, indicating that they were comparable to B-rank skills. This detail greatly surprised the other teachers of other academies, since Yunshin's data indicates that with his talent of omnipotence, he can improve his skills to a maximum of C rank. Then the school principal remembered that as recently as yesterday, Yunshin had only used red fireballs in the exam, which indicated the evolution of Yunshin's talent. Previously, everyone believed that due to the strong limitations of the omnipotence talent, Yunshin would not be able to increase his level even further, but now Yunshin could increase his level and become even stronger. Within just a couple of seconds, almost all the teachers from other academies began inviting Yunshin to study with them, offering him various powerful items and new high-level skills and abilities. Away from everyone, Hua still believed that Yunshin had no future, that all the resources that everyone wanted to give him would be wasted. The other teachers of the academies thought that Hua was simply jealous of them, since he had lost his opportunity to get a new talented student for the academy. Also, other teachers from other academies offered Hua to help their student, but Oh-hwa simply decided to leave the gym. No one bothered to pay attention to Oh-hwa's indifference towards his students, and everyone simply continued to invite Yunqin to join one of the proposed academies. Soon, Yunqin was approached by the curator of Jiangnan Academy, which owned the school where Yunqin studied, and she offered him to join their academy in exchange for books with the basic skills of all classes. The curator of Jiangnan Academy told Yunqin that there might be other classes in different countries around the world that no one is studying in their country. The curator also said that in Japan there are warrior classes such as ninja, onmyoji, and samurai, and in some Western countries there are classes such as witchers, sorcerers, and vampires. Then the curator of the Jiangnan Academy said that if Yunqin joined their academy, he might receive not only the opportunity to study foreign classes, but also a special polymorph weapon. The other teachers from other academies were surprised at how expensive it would be for Jiangnam Academy to obtain foreign books on various classes and polymorph weapons for Yunqin. Also, other teachers from other academies believed that Yunqin would definitely choose to enter Jiangnan Academy, since these are the conditions that are ideal for the most powerful and classless person. As a result, Yunqin felt that the best option for him would be to enroll in Jiangnan Academy. At this moment, Yunqin thought that Jiangnan Academy not only had the most favorable conditions, but also that this academy was closer to his home than other academies. After the commission, Yunqin went to the park to practice and try out his new skills. The first thing Yunqin did was try out the Divine Lightning skill, which should allow Yunqin to move much more efficiently. As soon as Yunqin tested his skill, he almost instantly found himself on the roof of one of the gazebos that stood in the park. Then Yunqin decided to try his skill a few more times, moving from the roof of the gazebo through the trees. Yunqin was very pleased with the Divine Lightning skill as his movement was now even faster and more efficient. While Yunqin was moving through the trees, he received several new messages, which indicated that he had received 7 million yuan from Jiangnan School and Academy. Then Yunqin decided that since the money had already been transferred to him, he should soon receive the rest of the rewards, after which he decided to practice his new skills a little more. Soon, 2 men in business suits arrived at Yunqin and handed Yunqin a very long briefcase. One of the men told Yunqin that this long case contained one of the rewards promised by the Jiangnan Academy. As soon as the men in business uniform handed the case to Yunqin, he immediately opened it, and it contained his first polymorph weapon. Demonic Destroyer, Yunqin's new weapon, had many useful properties, and it also had 3 forms, and in spear form, Yunqin received a bonus to physical damage and breaking through enemy defenses. In his longsword form, Yunqin could inflict damage on his opponents, which had a certain chance of causing them to bleed. In staff form, Yunqin received a damage bonus from magic damage and magic penetration. Yunqin took the Demonic Destroyer in his hands and felt that this weapon was perfect for him, since now he would not have to carry a large number of low-quality weapons with him. The man in the business suit told Yunqin that these weapons had been in the academy for a very long time, and that these weapons should last a very long time. All weapons are divided into several categories based on quality, where things made of black iron were considered the weakest, while things made of diamonds or more valuable materials were considered very strong. The man in the business suit also told Yunqin that he could re-enchant his weapon, changing its properties and effects, but if he failed, the weapon could deteriorate, or even be destroyed. After that, another man in a business suit opened the trunk of the car in which they arrived to give Yunqin another of the promised rewards. Opening the trunk, Yunqin saw a lot of books that described the basic skills of some rare classes. While Yunqin was happy that he could learn even more skills with these books, the men in business suits said that Yunqin could get the rest of the books from the academic library. Another man in a business suit said that in addition to weapons and books, Yunqin was given a new villa, and in order to start living in it, Yunqin only had to sign some papers and pick up the key. After training, Yunqin took Yuntang with him to move into their new home together, which was many times larger than their previous home. Yuntang was very happy about the new house, and she was very amazed by the size of this house. Yuntang was already eager to explore the new house with his brother, but Yunqin immediately began to study the books he had received, and he told his sister that there was no need to explore his own house. Yuntang was somewhat offended by Yunqin, while Yunqin himself studied the skills of other classes with interest. 70 years ago, people developed the biggest game ever, and hundreds of millions of players started playing it simultaneously. Many players decided to play the game under different races, such as orcs, goblins, elves, and so on. However, when the game merged with reality, the characteristics of all races were transmitted at the genetic level, and because of this, people with extremely unusual abilities began to appear. In addition, during the merger of the game and reality, the entire planet changed beyond recognition, as it became thousands of times larger, and the entire topography of the planet changed greatly, forming new geographical objects. The city of Dongyun, where Yunqin used to live and study, was very small, and there were practically no representatives of other races in it. However, now that Yunqin began to live in Jiangnan City, Yunqin believed that he had the opportunity to get to know this world a little better, and see many more different amazing things. After a month, Yunqin was able to not only master rare skills, but also practice with the demonic destroyer, and Yunqin was able to almost completely master it. After Yunqin studied all the books in the possession of the demonic destroyer, he decided to take a little break from constant study, and he had fun with Yun Tang for a whole month, visiting different places. Soon the holidays ended, and Yunqin already had to go to Jiangnan Academy, and before leaving, he wanted to say goodbye to his sister for a certain period of time. Before his departure, Yunqin told his sister that now she could not deny herself anything, since now they had a lot of money, and the sister wished her brother good luck and said that she would miss him. After briefly saying goodbye to his younger sister, Yunqin prepared a small suitcase with all the necessary things and got ready to go to Jiangnan Academy.